My name is Clay Robbins, and I lead ecosystem development for ZeroX. And today, I wanted to talk a bit about distribution and why I think it's the single most important near-term goal for the NFT ecosystem, and how platforms and collaboration are going to play a role in helping us get there. And so the quick 30-second pitch on ZeroX is we are a decentralized exchange protocol built on top of Ethereum, which in plain English means that we're building the infrastructure that allows developers to add exchange functionality to any product or service with just a few lines of code. And subsequently, what that enables is for users to exchange assets in a peer-to-peer manner without trusting a third party. And so since we launched in August of 2017, we've enabled the exchange of over $750 million in assets. And over the last few months, we've been working to build out support for non-fungible tokens because we believe that it's the Trojan horse that's going to bring in a massive new wave of both developers and users into the ecosystem. And so I want to take a second to pause and thank everyone for being here today because we're really in a small minority of people that actually give a shit about this stuff. It's represented as that small gray circle right there. And you know, that's great because, hey, we're early, it's awesome, it's really exciting, but it presents a huge challenge to us in that our role is to work to get other folks and groups to care about this stuff. So folks like developers who don't care about it at the moment, as well as end users who certainly don't. And so if distribution is sort of the near-term goal for us, I think developers are going to be the key group that we need to focus on because they're the ones that are going to build products and services that grow the supply side of the market. And so if we know who this group is, we need a model to think about how they look in a more granular fashion. And so the three groups that I've worked to identify, and I'm sure this will change over the coming months and years, is first issuers, who I'd argue are the most important group because they are the primary minters of assets and they're building the products and services that those assets will interact with. Second group is distributors, who are any non-first party platform provider that allows end users to access assets. So this is like a marketplace such as OpenSea or eMoon. And then the third group is platform providers who are really building the sexy stuff, the infrastructure like exchange functionality and custody functionality that both distributors and issuers will use to build their products. And so now that we know who we're going after, let's talk a little bit about why. Why does distribution matter as opposed to some other end goal, near-term end goal? And so in short, I think what distribution does is it allows free markets to parse signal from noise. And so a historical example that I use to describe this is the advent of the printing press. So before the printing press was introduced, access to books was limited to really three key groups: educational institutions, religious institutions, and the ultra-wealthy who could fund a private library full of these rare hand-replicated books. But in the 1400s, along comes this guy named Johannes Gutenberg, and he introduces the printing press. And overnight, the cost of replication decreases, and it allows for the propagation of books to millions and millions of people across the world. And over time, what this allowed for is for the free market and individuals to decide, hey, these ideas, we like them, and we want to continue to perpetuate them forward. Things like getting rid of feudalism and rolling out democracy. That's probably something we should do. And we learned that from a book, so that's cool. But it also led to us casting aside ideas that we didn't necessarily like, and they were lost to history. And so what this means in the context of the NFT ecosystem is something that's really cool and that I'm excited about is that we already have the printing press. And what's more, that printing press isn't subject to the censorship and curation of the few that owned the printing presses back in the day. And in fact, any developer with an internet connection can issue an asset and propagate it to millions of prospective users. And so what this does over time is it allows for two things to happen. One, it allows developers to figure out, hey, these are the business models that actually work in the context of this technology. And for end users to say, hey, these are the experiences that we like. Build more of them, and we will use them, and we'll use them over and over because gaming is habitual, financial markets are habitual, and that'll drive long-term growth. And it'll take us from the toy phase that we're in today to more of the mainstream adoption that everyone is so excited about. And so that's why distribution matters, but why are we failing to get there today? And I think the number one reason why we're failing to get there today is we're introducing too much choice to prospective developers. It's similar to when I go to the grocery store and I'm extremely hangry and I want a breakfast cereal, and I'm presented with this series of options. And I love Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but I also love Captain Crunch Berries, and I don't know which one I want to get, so I end up giving up and walking out of the aisle and going to my true staple for breakfast, which is pancakes. The same thing is happening for developers today, like a game developer who has spent 99% of their time building this awesome game experience that's cohesive, that's frictionless, and that people are going to love. And they want to make this last mile decision of, hey, I want to add blockchain or non-fungible tokens to the product. And then they have to look at this. Well, first, you need to figure out what layer 1 protocol you're going to use. Do you want to build on top of Ethereum that has the current set of developer mindshare and likely stands the best chance at sort of long-run distribution? Or do you want to go with something like an EOS or Tron where they'll pay you several $100,000s up front, but you'll eventually run into possibly the trouble of hitting distribution? Then you have to think about middleware. What do you want to use from an exchange standpoint? What marketplaces do you want to partner with to hit distribution? How do you manage nodes? Do I need to think about compliance? Is the CFTC going to come after me? Am I going to get sued by the SEC? And then finally, what do I do from a custody standpoint? Can I get away with a hosted solution, or do I need to go the full self-custody route? And so it's really easy to see why a prospective developer would look at this and say, well, I've already spent all this time building my game. Why would I go through all this effort to build this? I'm just going to go back to the tried and true model and eat my pancakes. And so I think this carries through to folks that actually get over the barrier to entry as well, because platforms, while making the choice is one thing, actually making the right choice that allows you to get to distribution is another, because it's really the piping that determines how you get to distribution. And second to that, it carries through to the end user experience, because choosing the wrong combination of platforms can actually lead to a friction-filled end user experience that will hurt adoption in the long run. And so 2 examples that I wanted to share quickly that kind of highlight some of the critical choices that developers need to make in conjunction with building their products are, first, an NFT marketplace for video game assets. So from a custody standpoint, because on a per user basis, there's not a lot of value at stake, you can likely get away with a pseudo-hosted solution or a hosted solution because it provides a more frictionless experience compared to something like a hardware wallet that not everyone's going to want to use. And from an exchange standpoint, you want to think about how can I propagate these assets across as many surfaces as possible so I get the most number of at-bats at acquiring net new users. So something that silos liquidity to a specific website that you have to drive traffic to just kneecaps you in terms of trying to get to distribution quickly. And then finally, from a compliance standpoint, well, because these are digital collectibles, they're likely not going to be subject to the same regulatory scrutiny that something like a financial instrument will. So you don't necessarily need to worry about it, but I know Perkins Coie is a sponsor here, so maybe talk to them and they can give you a little more insight. But contrast that with something like a collateralized debt marketplace, which is a marketplace for serious financial instruments. It's collateralized debt. This is something that is a little bit different because on a per user basis, the value at stake is likely going to be higher. So you'll need to roll with a self-custody route, which allows your users to choose what type of custody solution they want to use, whether it's a hardware wallet or something like a multi-sig wallet. From an exchange standpoint, while liquidity is extremely important, I think the most important thing for financial markets to think about is the security and trust that they have in the smart contracts that are facilitating or enabling the exchange. Because in the old financial world, that paradigm shifts from a world where counterparty risk is with the bank that you can call up and actually help to solve an issue that you're running into, down to a smart contract in the open finance context where the way that you have some element of recourse is still to be determined and will likely play out in the courts. And then from a compliance standpoint, because as I alluded to before, these are financial instruments, you'll likely need to consider what regulatory bodies will look at this stuff. And so this is all meant to highlight the need for a LAMP. And a LAMP is a reference to a LAMP stack, which is a common Web 2.0 software development tech stack. And LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And what LAMP does is, in the context of building applications today, it allows developers to focus more so on building and shipping product rather than hand-wringing thinking about, oh, well, what sort of tech stack do I want to use? And so the challenge I want to leave everyone with today is to think through what are these common technologies or platforms that need to be bundled together and then presented to these prospective audiences that I outlined before, such that we can lower the barrier to entry for development and ultimately lead to both distribution and long-term adoption. And so I can talk about this stuff for hours, but I know that we are out of time. So if you want to continue the conversation, either find me here or on Twitter at Krabby Lions or on email at clay@zerox.com. Thank you.